Oh, hello, everyone. I am on the line with the beautiful and talented Andrea Lewis. She is an actress, producer, singer, and so much more. Welcome, Andrea. Can you tell them a little bit more about yourself?
I don't know. You did just fine, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I consider myself a creative, or sometimes I say I'm an actress and a filmmaker, or an entertainer. I do a little bit of everything, but my focus now in my life is on storytelling, and that could be in a multitude of mediums. So yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure things are so different now that we're in a pandemic and everything is moving to the digital space. So before I go even further, let them know which country, island you represent.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if I could say one, but I always just say that I'm a West Indian because my mom is from Jamaica and my dad is from St. Vincent. And
Okay.
I didn't grow up like one or the other. I grew up very much with both. And so, yeah, not everybody has that. Like, if you have parents from two different islands, at least when I was in high school, like I knew other kids like that, but they were like very dominant of one side versus the other side. And my experience was very dual. So, yeah, I'm a Jamaican Vincentian.
All right, so you're a real Callaloo and you are
Yeah.
from Toronto,
Yeah,
right?
from Toronto. Yeah.
Awesome. How long have you been in LA?
I have lived off and on in LA, maybe 11 or 12 years. In between that time, I lived in New York. So I kind of say that's my experience. That's my length of time in the US in general.
Gotcha.
Because, yeah, that's how long I'd say I've been in the US. But I know LA more than New York, where I've spent a longer amount of time living in LA. I moved to LA first, and then I moved to New York, and then I moved back to LA. So, yeah.
Cool. So what was that transition like? Because I'm sure, even though I feel like Toronto is the New York of Canada.
Even after living in New York, I don't think that. I know people like to call it that, and I guess it's like because of the diversity is where we are similar to New York.
Yes.
But it's a much smaller city. The pace is not as crazy. And so, yeah, I went to Chicago only for a weekend, and I was only in the downtown area, but the downtown area of Chicago reminded me more of Toronto. And the size of that city, it just reminded me more. But diversity, yes. Diversity, we are like New York in that way. But pace is different. And I think that's the thing. When I think of New York, I think of a certain pace and
Yes.
and just like a kind of person and like energy. And Toronto is a very beautiful city and very much a city, but it is also like just more chill. Everybody just more chill than any New York experience I've ever had. But yeah, that's what I would say. And I guess that's the thing though. We have a very diverse culture, and Torontonians kind of pride themselves on our diversity and also being aware of cultural diversity. We love that part of being from Toronto. Anybody that's from Toronto is like, I know every culture, I know about all these people. They're very excited for that. So yeah.
Awesome. And like you said, you have West Indian parents and you are an artiste. So I know for a lot of us, it's like, go to school and take up your book and you become a doctor or a lawyer. Were your parents like encouraging of your choice to be just a performer?
Sort of. I started as a kid, or as a toddler, really. So my mom is who got me into it, and like I said, my mom is from Jamaica. So from her side, my family, they were very excited. They didn't really see anything off with it. My dad, however, being from St. Vincent, and his family is very academic and very much like, you go to school and you're going to be a doctor. You're going to have some kind of like career, I guess, traditional career. It's like, even if I went to be a school teacher, they would have been like, that's great. And so at some point in my life, though I was always a working entertainer, my dad and my did think like, oh, well, aren't you like going to go to college now or go to university now? And like, I don't know, do something else. And I was like, no, I'm really not. And so that's where I was a little bit different, I think, from that side of my family, in the sense of I took the arts very seriously, and it wasn't just kind of like a hobby. It was my life. And I think if I had two parents from St. Vincent, or maybe if it was just up to my dad, it would have been treated a little more like a hobby after a while. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's cool. That makes sense. So if you haven't picked up on it by now, I am a huge fan. I'm
Oh,
trying not to have a fangirl moment right now.
thank you.
I grew up watching Degrassi, and I saw you on like different movies and things. And then the transition from film and television to doing YouTube and making your own content, I'm enjoying that as well. Black actress on YouTube, y'all have to check it out. I watched the whole thing. So my next question for you is, how does your culture impact your work?
Well, I guess this is the thing, because it's like anybody that's from Toronto or is a West Indian person from Toronto, it's just naturally a part of who you are. And
Yes.
and you really don't know any other experience. So I find for myself, it's always a dynamic that I try to throw into some capacity within my work, whether it's like a joke or it's just like a cultural reference or something like that, just because like I am a first generation child of immigrants. And so though, yeah, I grew up in North America, my influence is this thing. So I always think about my characters, I guess, in that way too, is like, what if they also had parents like this? And how can I kind of splash that in? And I'm a big fan of the diaspora. I'm a big fan of showing the diversity
Yes,
of
I love that.
like Black people and people of color in general, I think. And so that's where it just influences, I think, my thought process on my characters, is that I'm always thinking of when you eventually, if you get to show their parents, or if you get to show just something a little more complex about their backgrounds, besides just the regular story, then I try my best to think of it in like well, maybe her dad is Dominican, or maybe her mom is this, or maybe, just other things, because we really are those people. We really do live those lives. And like I said, being born and raised in Toronto, that's like just a part of people from Toronto. That's just like, you just naturally would be like, where are you from? And you don't mean like Canada. You would mean like where your family
Like,
is.
what's your background? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just kind of like a part of your day-to-day conversation and understanding. And so I think as somebody who is of that, it's almost impossible to kind of write without thinking like that, or create without thinking about your people in that way, your characters, and what their backgrounds would be like, and what things they would like or not like, or be comfortable doing, or anything like that. You would just, and it would also come out in the ways that it does in your real life kind of thing, where now in living in the US, I have a lot more American friends, but their backgrounds are not necessarily like any of my Canadian friends, in the sense of our parents are not from this country. And so, every now and again, you do have a conversation about food, or you do have a conversation about upbringing, or you do have a conversation about like what would be right and what wouldn't be right for you versus their upbringing. And so I try my best to slide those kinds of things into my characters too, because it is a unique experience and it's specifically mine. And I also think, I love to see West Indian women specifically, and men too, but I love to see West Indian women within stuff. Like I like to see that about them. I do. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I look forward to more. So with the pandemic going on, and just all the productions have stopped, and travel has changed, and locations are closed, how has that affected the projects that you were working on?
It's affected them, I guess, in the sense of I've had to pivot, not stop anything, just change of timeline, because it is so unknown. You really can't you can't be like stuck on an idea,
right?
Because for one, we have no clue when we'll be allowed, when a second wave will hit. How many crew is allowed, what like, I read something today that was like, big sets, like big studios might not see production until November. And you think about something like that, like that's like a really long time. And then even in November, it's like there's like American Thanksgiving, there's like all these different things, like this is getting close to the holidays now. So you're like, what? That's when we're supposed to be getting back into production. And so I think for anybody that's a more independent filmmaker used to a smaller crew, that can also affect you too, because it's kind of like, okay, well, does that mean us as well? Is that kind of us before? I'm still constantly waiting to hear like, what's the restrictions? Like, are we allowed 5 people on a set? Are we allowed 2? What are you allowed to not do? And so for me, at the beginning of the quarantine mess, I started to just focus on the productions that I could control. And anybody that is in the production world knows that it's a long process. Pre-production is long. Like getting something ready to film is a long process. Is not like this little, oh, I wrote something yesterday, we're going to film it tomorrow. Like, it doesn't necessarily work like that.
Yeah.
So if you can, you're focusing on things that you are in pre-production for. And so in a weird way, some of this pause has been a blessing to some of my projects, because it's given us more time to really finalize things, to raise more money for it, to think about it differently, to think about the storytelling differently, anything like that. And so that's the only change that I've had to do, is more so pivot versus stop. Nothing has stopped me in my tracks. Like, maybe if there was content that you were second guessing, you would have done. Like even Zoom, honest to God, where this would not have been something that in December I would have been like, and I'm going to do Zoom meetings. I would have been like,
same.
But it's kind of forced you to do this other kind of content. And in that, it's also forced you to come up with new ideas or goals, or even like, the idea of live, where live is truly not my favorite, but I've been able to appreciate how it's opened up content for people, because it has made it like, okay, let's do something a little different to what I normally would have done. So anybody that probably would have overthought doing interviews or connecting with somebody else is now being inspired to do something like that. And I think that's a good thing. And I think a lot of creatives right now, if they have felt stuck, they shouldn't necessarily. They should think more so on pivoting versus feeling stuck about their stuff.
I like that.
Yeah, because I think the stuck is where you'll be. And to not think about it as competing. I think when the pandemic when quarantine first hit, there was so much pressure to be creating.
Yes.
And it's like, you're in a pandemic. Like, why would I be able to create right now? Why would I be like that? That's like really, really hard. If anything, I should be thinking about how to survive. And I think if you're creative in this moment, you should be thinking just in that lines. Just how can I survive? How can I maintain the audience that I have? How can I re-inspire myself? What does that look like? And I think that will help you to create versus I've got to keep up with everybody else. Everybody else has all this stuff going on. It's like, if you think like that, it would just be too hard. It would just be way too difficult.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, we see live notifications like every 5 minutes, somebody else is going live. But like you said, there has been some benefit to that, because like even this conversation happening, I would have never asked you for this like a year or 2 years ago. I'm like, nope, she's famous, she's busy, you don't got nothing going on, you don't have the credentials. And, now everybody's kind of at home. So it's just like, what do I have to lose?
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are thinking like that. Weird thing is, though, I think at the same time, people are oddly busier than they would have been, I guess. I think that, especially being in LA. LA is like a weird city where it's like, because it's so spread apart and there's so much traffic, you could do like 2 meetings and be like, ooh, I am spent, because it's like, just the traffic to get to those things was a lot. Versus now, where you are kind of confined to one place, I'll find my days will be like packed, like back to back. So I do think it's interesting to be like at home and to feel legitimately busier. And today, even I saw somebody tweet like that Zoom fatigue is like a thing. And I was like,
it is. I concur. Yes.
I've never even thought about that. But then it's like, yeah, that does happen. Even just before this call, one of my friends FaceTimed me really quick. And I was tempted to not answer, because I was like, I don't want to be too tired. I'm going to have to do a Zoom. I don't want to be. like exhausted. I want to have energy, but it's true. It's like just a whole other life. We're adapting. All of us are adapting.
Agreed. So let's move on to cultural preservation.
Okay.
So the two questions are, is it important? And if so, why?
I definitely think it's important. I think it's important because you have to know where you come from. I think everybody should know where they come from. I think that's a conversation and it's maybe like a bit tricky, but I have this conversation a lot with my friends who are African American, who have like out loud been like, oh, I don't know where I'm from, or I feel lost, or I feel like this. And that thing that they feel is a real feeling, right? Like not having a clue where you're from. And not to say that West Indians are so much like, oh, we know where we're from, but there's a difference very much so in our culture versus African American culture. And so, no, we might not know where we came off of the slave ships, but we had a difference in preserving our culture.
Absolutely.
And mind you, from an outsider's point looking in, I definitely think African Americans have a culture that is not anywhere else in the world, but is just here. And so I'm like, oh, I don't see it like that. I think you guys do have a culture. You do have a place where you're from. Like, it's very unique to me to meet somebody who's like 6 generations from Georgia or like 5 generations from Michigan. Like that. What? Like, I wouldn't know that at all. Cause it's like, my family is like 2 generations from Toronto. Like, so like, you know, in reality, that is cultural stuff. And so I do think it is important to preserve just because there's so much richness. And I know for myself, I think about that often with if I was to have children, what parts of my culture would I try to pass on?
I think about that too.
Like, because I love being a West Indian. I genuinely do. And even one of my friends we were having this conversation, she was a bit like almost sad to think of the fact that like, she's not from the islands, that her mom's from Barbados. And she's like, and now I'm going to have my own kid. And like, what am I, you know? And I was like, no, but I think you get to still kind of pass it down. And depending on how you do it, I'll say this, like I have a little cousin, and when he was maybe 7 or 8, somebody asked him where he was from, and he genuinely did not know whether to answer Jamaica or Canada. He was that and
that's a real thing.
Both of his parents are actually born in Toronto. They are not born in Jamaica. So in reality, he should just say he's from Toronto. But just how much the culture has been like, okay, it's moving on to you now. And so I think it's important for all cultures to try their best. Plus there's just, there's something very unique about being a West Indian person, about the differences between each island and our, but then also the uniqueness that's amongst all of us. Like that stuff is fun. And so I do think it's important to preserve.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes I get pushback and that whole notion of like, you're in America, you should be American. But I'm like, you know, my lineage is my lineage. My heritage is my heritage. Like if all those things didn't happen, I wouldn't be here. Yeah. And I'm just thankful that I have this platform and this space to explore and share our stories as well as celebrate. So thank you so much for sharing in that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference between America and Canada is that that's not the marketing of Canada. Canada is like, wherever you're from is what you are. And that doesn't matter how many generations ago, that's what you are. And versus in America, yes, it is very much like you are an American. And you, at least in Toronto, we don't have an African-American culture. Right. We only have West Indians. So this is why it's easier for us to just be like, no, we're all West Indians. There is no like other running culture. And so in America, I could always see even my cousins, anybody that I knew that was West Indian, but they grew up in the US, there was always like almost a battle between which one to be or not be, or how much to show or not show, because it just wasn't the same. And only as an adult, I started to understand, it's like, oh, they have another culture running against their own. And so this is why you kind of having to make a choice on a regular basis.
Man. So I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm so proud of you and the work that you're doing. And we are at our final question. Okay. And so that question is, what can or how can the West Indian Americans tribe support you and your work?
I don't know. I think you do a good job. I don't
Oh,
know.
well, thank you.
I don't know if I have anything extra. I mean, I think it's always great to see West Indians celebrated and especially highlighted in any way that you can. I honestly think you do a great job with the Instagram page and what you're doing content wise. And so I think it's more me. I'm like, how can I support West Indians more? How can I be like a voice for all the island girls in the world, especially if they had parents from 2 different islands? Because yeah, so I think you're doing a great job. I don't know if I'd say anything more than this.
Oh, thank you so much. And you are too. Like I said, guys, you got to tune into Black Actress because the dialect comes in, those memories come in. Like I like it because it's so relatable, even if you're not West Indian. Like just if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're an urban person, whatever, it's just like, just a vibe. So continue on. And yeah. And that's it. And we're going to keep supporting each other. And again, building that network where we can pull from each other and support and have our own and have things to pass down and make it just a little bit easier for the generations after us.
Yes, 100%. I'm with you.
Okay, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. It's still kind of early where you are.
It totally is. I know. It's like it's not even 6 o'clock, which is great. So yeah. So thank you.
And let them know before I sign us off. Let them know about your YouTube and your handle, all that good stuff, which I'm also going to type
I guess
in.
they can always search my name, which is Andrea Lewis, and my YouTube is Andrea Lewis channel. My name on Instagram is Andrea Lewis, and so Andrea Lewis kind of just will. You put that in, everything.
I like that because some people have like Andrea Lewis 1.2_-86. I'm like, I'm not looking for that.
Yeah, it's too hard. No, I'm like, just put in my name, it'll come up. Andrea Lewis. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.